Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to Ramadan FM with your host Zainab Zaeem and her show Breaking Stereotypes. So before I introduce our guest for this evening, a reminder that our show is interactive. The studio line is 0116 4822 You can also text or WhatsApp us on 077 488 55055, and you can also send comments or questions via our Facebook, Instagram and YouTube page. So please do send in your questions or comments, or call in if you have any questions you want to ask of our tonight's guest. As always, I always like to thank the team at Ramadan FM, my guests and my listeners, without whom this show would not be possible. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Sabiha Master. Assalamu alaikum, Sabiha.
Walaikum salam.
Now, I do call Sabiha Sabu, so if I end up calling her that during the show, I do apologize in advance. I've known Sabiha for a while now, and I've always admired the work that she does, albeit there's not enough that I know about what it is that Sabu does. So tonight it's going to not only help our listeners, but it's also going to help me as well and expose us all to a much needed conversation. Okay, so Sabu, why don't you introduce us to what it is that you do?
Okay, so I work for Leicestershire County Council, Family Help. I work in children's services. So the best way to explain that is like the second tier of safeguarding. So if it's not safeguarding, we cover that. So it could be anything from a family, if there's domestic violence, if there's children with SEN, which is what we're going to talk about today, hopefully. Also, if there's any behaviour concerns, smoking, any crime, any of those sort of issues that a family might have, we will try and support them. We do a lot of the parenting type programs as well. So basically my role is to triage when we get a referral and figure out what a family needs by phoning the family and making lots of investigative work, and then try and get them the best service.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So before we move on, the word triage, now I do know what that means, but for the purposes of our listeners, could you explain what you mean when you say triage?
So if a family needs any help, they will fill out a referral form and they will send it in to us. Our role will be to have a look at that referral, read into it and try to figure out what it is that family actually needs. Talk to the family and then put it forward to the right service. Now, sometimes that service can be internal within our own system, and sometimes it could be a service that's out there in the community. So that's basically triaging it, just kind of checking to see what a family needs.
So putting it through stages, really. Yeah. Okay. Now, you work in a department called, or the project that you work on is known as Family Help, right? And that's for Leicestershire County Council. What areas do you cover under Leicestershire County Council?
Leicestershire County Council is huge. I wouldn't even know where to start in the sense of telling you what it is it covers. I mean, there's Charnwood, which is like Syston, Queniborough, East Goscott, Thurmaston, Barrow, Loughborough, and it just goes on. So that's Charnwood. You've got Northwest. The one that's probably more known is the Oadby Wigston, parts of Braunston, Leicester Forest East. So Leicestershire County Council cover a very big range, and obviously we cover all of that. My, I suppose, expertise area is more Charnwood, because that's the area I've been working in the most. But we do work across the board. So, yeah.
Okay.
It's huge.
So the areas that Leicestershire County Council cover, of course, we're currently based in Leicester City, right? Yeah. So I'm assuming that Leicester City has their equivalent.
Yeah. So we are known as Family Help, and previously we were a while back known as Early Help. Leicester City Council have their own version, which is Early Help. And so they cover more the inner city part. So yeah, but they'll have a pretty much similar sort of service doing the same sort of work. Just differs a little bit.
Okay, so for anyone listening to tonight's show, if you don't live in the Leicestershire County Council area, then that's fine. The Leicester City Council also have their equivalent. So do reach out to those. And I'm sure the Leicester City Council's website will provide information.
Yeah, so you've got the Leicester City Council website that will provide that. I'll also will give you a phone number for them at some point. And so, you just give them a call. If you put on Google, literally Leicester City Council Early Help, it will come up, and then you'll be able to go onto their page and find whatever you need. It's the same for Leicestershire County Council as well. You can just put it on Google and it will take you straight to the page, even right down to referral form.
Okay, brilliant. Jazakallah for that. Okay, so in a nutshell, Early Help for Leicester City Council and Family Help provides services to families where families are experiencing difficulties that can normally that is not usually supported by universal services such as schools and GPs alone. Now, you gave a brief explanation of what that is. Can we expand on that just a little bit more? Are you able to provide an example, a scenario where Family Help would become involved?
Yeah, so if, let's say you've got a child who's just been newly diagnosed with, let's say, autism, you're not really sure what to do, your child is struggling, having lots of meltdowns, are not able to sort of articulate what they want to say, because some children are select mutes as well, so they won't speak. Then, you might put a referral through to us because you might think, well, what other services, what other help is out there? You try to find like childcare, you might try to find activities to go to and you're not able to because they can't meet your child's needs. Then you can put referral through to us, and then we will see if there's external services that can do it. We also have a thing called the local offer, and there's also play and leisure, which are activities that are inclusive for children with additional needs, so that they can then go to that. So, they would be able to put a referral through to us, and we will try and find the right help.
Okay.
The way I always say to families is, if you're not sure, just call and ask. If you give us a call on the duty numbers, we will be able to advise you on whether to put a referral in or say to you, no, go here or go there. If you speak to your schools are very, very aware of our services, both county and city. They will help you put the referrals in as well. And they will also tell you try and help you in accessing our services.
So it's the age-old adage, isn't it? If you don't ask, you don't get. Absolutely. Now, apologies for my ignorance here. I say alhamdulillah in a way that I don't mean to offend anyone here, but we always ask for good health of our children. Yeah. And I've been blessed with 4 beautiful, healthy children. And I myself did not know that these services were out there. And that could be simply because I've not needed those services. So let's say you've got a family who have got a child that they need some additional support with. What help? I mean, you've explained the help in quite detail there, but what would be their first step for them to take? You've got a parent here, let's say someone who is not English speaking, is not familiar with our rules and so on. They're probably already feeling overwhelmed with what's going on. What would your advice be for that person or that family listening tonight? What should they really be doing?
I mean, the easiest way, if you're not sure, is we say go to the school, ask for the pastoral to help you fill out a referral form, and then we will talk you through it and help you. My longest call with a family has been 2 hours of just sitting there listening to a parent tell me how hard it is with their child who had a disability. Now, I wasn't able to help them in any way, but actually I just listened. And sometimes that's all a parent wants, is to be heard. So, we just say, like I said, call us, or you can ask the school, fill out a referral form, and then that's the hardest part, filling in that form. Then we will do the rest, and we will try and help you through the rest of that process. And there is things like, we call it respite. It doesn't mean you get to have a day away or anything, but it just means that you might get an hour's break where you can have a cup of coffee and not worry, because your child is able to go to a safe place where they're well cared for, but have fun.
So from your experience, and we're talking about our community here, so BAME, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, what would you say in terms, I mean, I'm not going to ask you for statistics or anything like that, but
Please don't.
but what would you say would be your experience in how many of our BAME families actually reach out for help?
So it's a bit difficult because I work in the county. We probably have less BAME families that are going to need that support. In the city, there would probably be a lot more. But just in general, of being out there in the community and just going to events and stuff, I do find that our community struggle the most. They're scared to ask for help because they don't want to look like they're not able to cope. They're scared to come to things because they're worried that people are going to talk about their child. Because, being realistic, these children, they will have a meltdown at some point, and there is no controlling that. And you just it must be hard enough for that family without knowing that there's people staring at them and thinking, please tell your child to be quiet because it's my wedding, kind of thing. It just, we need to be a little bit more accepting and understand how that family feels and how that parent in that situation is. We just need to let them be heard.
It's that stigma that's associated with people asking for help. I mean, we come from a long generation of we don't ask for help. That's in our nature. We're inherent in that, where we as I suppose, a community, we don't tend to ask others for help because we ourselves are so used to getting things done.
And I think there is this big stigma of that, people do think that there isn't any help out there. There is, it's just knowing where to go. And, it's not perfect help, but it is there. And, every little bit counts. I think people do think that, there's just not enough. You hear it so often on TV and things like that. And, it's not the best system. But there is stuff out there. It's just asking for it.
It's something better than nothing, shall
absolutely.
we put it there? So in terms of, you said, you mentioned about the stigma about reaching out and getting help and so on. One of the things that when you and I were talking came to my mind is there's a whole stereotype out there about if I was to reach out and ask for help, because I can't cope or I need additional support, social workers are going to storm into my house and take my child away.
Yeah. So many times when we phone up a family and you'll say, oh, I'm from Family Help, they'll say, oh, I don't need a social worker, and you're like, I'm not a social worker. Oh, that's good. Well, you won't take my child. And, I can cope. And when we get that you can cope, but we just want to make life a little bit easier. But, there is that fear. And I think that fear is even worse in our community or in the BAME community, that as soon as you ask for that help, that your child, they'll take it away because they think you can't look after them or that you're hurting them in some way.
Now, in some instances, social workers can get involved, right?
Yeah.
But just because social workers get involved doesn't mean automatically that your child's going to be taken away.
No, not at all. And, social workers get involved for so many different reasons. And if we're talking about children with additional needs, social workers might get involved just because you might need more support in the home. You might not be able to, that your child might not be able to walk or sit up, and you might need specialist equipment and things. And actually social workers have to assess that to see whether you need that. So, social workers are there to help you, not kind of hinder you in that sense. So we need to take that stigma away. If you call for help, you're always going to get a social worker.
I suppose it really comes down to all these stories that people hear. You hear of all the bad stories out there. Oh, social workers swooped in. Oh, this family had this nervous breakdown, so the child was taken away. But you don't hear about any of the good stories where the support has come in and helped the family and they've stayed together as a family unit. Okay, so when you've got a family that comes to you for help, right? You've probably seen it all, right? What is the one thing that you would want to say to a family when they are reaching out for that support?
I suppose the biggest thing is don't be shy and don't be scared. Tell us what what is going on, because if you don't tell us enough, we can't help you. Most of the time, there will always be some kind of help out there. But if we don't know the full story or everything that's going on for you, then, you're not going to be able to get that right help. And then you're going to struggle.
Okay, so can we talk about confidentiality in the sense that we're Asian, right? You're Asian. If you're helping an Asian family, now this might not have happened. If it hasn't happened, feel free to say it hasn't. Has there ever come a moment where you've been helping a family, or you might help a family, and they're a bit worried, there's an Asian person helping me, I'm going to get judged by this person?
Not in this job, I haven't. Not going to be honest with you, I've not had that. But in my previous role, because I worked more in this community then, there was more of that, because I was going into predominantly Muslim homes, trying to support families that had many different difficulties. And they were very, very worried, because, they would see me out, in some bazaar, or they'd see me at some charity event or even a wedding, and they'd be worried that I'm not going to say anything, or, will people know if they talk to me that, they must be getting some help. And so, at that time, I used to always make it really clear to them that actually I will not be the first person to approach you. I'll let you approach me. So if you are comfortable saying hello, then I will talk to you. And obviously I'm never going to talk about your child. We'll just talk in general. But, confidentiality is so important in any of these jobs that we do. We don't, even now, if I knew a family it came to me, I would have to go to my manager straight away and say, I know this family, which has happened, and said, so can you give it to somebody else? And they will take over, because we don't want to compromise in any way. And we're not even talking about being related. Even if they lived in my street, or I walked past them on a regular basis, if you felt that you knew them enough, that child came to your kid's school, you would just say, I think it's better it goes to somebody else.
You recuse yourself.
Yeah, because
absolutely.
You want to make sure that family is comfortable and able to not feel compromised in any way.
Yeah. Similarly, in my line of work as well, I've had that quite a few times, where you get approached by someone to say, I've got a friend. And I actually had that a couple of weeks ago, where a friend of mine came to me, and another lawyer, and he said to me he's got a case that he wants to give to me. And I turned around and said, look, I don't mind taking this case on. What you don't know is that I'm very familiar with this person, and that person knows me really well. So they may not be comfortable in me doing their case. So before you actually give it to me, speak to them first to say, look, it's going to be this person. And immediately that person turned around and said, no, I don't. And it was nothing to do with the fact that they don't like me, whatever. We get along perfectly. There's no issues there. But they just wanted, even though they knew it was going to be confidential, they just wanted someone that they didn't know, that the work gets done and they walk away at the end of the day, and they don't have to bump into each other.
Yeah, because they're worried that every time you see them afterwards, they're always going to think, oh, what do they think? They know my business. Like you said, it doesn't matter how well you know them or how much you get on. It is nice in some respect when you do know them to some level, because I've been working in the council for 11 years now, but before that I worked for a charity, and some of the young people are obviously now adults, and I will bump into their parents, or I bump into them, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm doing really well, I've done this, I've done that, they moved on with their life, and it's nice to see that they have made successes, and somewhere along the way you touch their lives.
Absolutely. On the flip side to that, I've had it the other way around as well, where someone's introduced me to a possible client and said, oh, it's going to be Zainab on the other end, and they've been ecstatic because they know me, they know how firm and rigorous I am, and they couldn't have asked for anyone better. So it really comes down to apologies, my producer's telling me something there. Check your WhatsApp, please. Apologies. It comes down to how that individual feel, right? So here as well, it's the same. It comes down to the individual family. The support is there. It's all confidential. No one's going to come up to you in public and say to you, oh, by the way, how's your child doing? I'm helping. I get that all the time. I actually walked into a shop 2-3 years ago, and it was a shop that's well known in our community, and there was somebody there working, and they knew me on a case, right?
Okay.
And I walked in, and you could see the color just drained from their face because they didn't realize I lived in this area, and they thought, okay, now everyone's going to find out. And I was being served by that person. So I asked, how you doing? Assalamu alaikum. How's everything? I didn't mention how I knew them. And then when the boss came over and said, how did you know each other? I just said, we know each other from the community, which in effect is not a lie, because I knew that person was in the community. They may not have known, but I said, I've seen him around. Yeah. And that's it. And that person then went, relief. And they felt that relief because they realized, right, my situation is my situation. Yeah. But for us, recusing ourselves, it's conflict of interest is what we have in our line of work. Yeah. So if we know someone quite intimately, we know the background and so on, we would have to recuse ourselves unless they sign off a conflict of interest waiver. Okay, so we are almost halfway through our show. As a reminder to everyone who is listening, you've tuned into Ramadan FM on 87.7 and DAB 9B with Breaking Stereotypes. Your host is Zainab Zaeem. My guest is Sabiha Master from Family Help at Leicestershire County Council. The studio line is 0116 4822 086, and the text and WhatsApp is 077 488 055. You can send in your questions, or you could telephone into the studio line, or you could post your comments on Facebook and Instagram. So we've covered quite a lot in the first half of our show. What we haven't talked about is when a child or when a family member has been given a diagnosis, right? And it not being accepted in the community. Now, this is a big one, okay?
Yeah, and I think, the difficult part is, I think if you even take it a step back, parents themselves struggle to first accept a diagnosis because they understand the implications, or sometimes don't even fully understand the implications of their child having an additional need. Like you said, if you've never had a single family member or people that have been diagnosed with ADHD or even autism or any other disability, your first thought is really, what am I going to do? And, how is this going to affect me? And, you just think about their life and as a parent, that's the first thing that's going to go through their head, and then it's like, I think the worst situation was I got a parent last week who then said to me, they got diagnosed, and the clinician, so the doctor who diagnosed them, said, there's no services out there. You need to accept that. You're on your own. You need to just get on with it. And that parent took that away because the doctor told them that. And for 2 years, they just got on with it. And they struggled. And it was only by some fluke they met somebody who said, why are you not getting any help? There is help out there. And then when they started really looking, they found loads of help, and they put a referral through to us. And I think, that is the hardest part for a family, is being, first not being told enough information, the correct information, and, parents taking it because they think the doctors told them this. And I suppose in the BAME community, I think it's a little bit more of that, because the doctor told them, that's it. It's their word is the right word.
That's the final word.
But, I always say, keep fighting, keep looking, keep asking. Like you said earlier, if you don't ask, you don't get. Yeah. And, nothing is outside of the norm. So ask for whatever you want. And, it might say no, but just sometimes they'll say yes.
Well, I suppose the GP was in a position of trust, wasn't it?
It wasn't a GP, it was actually a CAMS doctor.
Okay, so you'd have thought that the CAMS doctor would have known.
They know some services, and they know that it is hard to get into these services. So I think sometimes some of them think it's a bit of tough love, to set them up, because, it is a tough road, and that road is never going to end to some level until, so they think they're doing good by saying that to them, but actually for some families, they take it as that absolute, that the doctor
That's
said there's
gospel,
nothing,
yeah.
and so there's nothing. And they never really thought to look into it or anything because they just didn't think it was out there.
And I think that's one thing about our BAME community as well. And I don't speak for the majority. I can only speak for the experiences that I have.
Yeah.
But one thing I have noticed is like what you say, is once the doctor tells us, once somebody in a position of trust, someone who's above us tells us something, that's it, that's set in stone. But it's like what I say, it's not like it used to be back in the old days, and I do that with quotation marks, where we didn't have Google or the internet to help us look for those services. Now you've got an abundance of resource out there that you can actually just quickly go onto the internet and check.
Yeah, and I think it's changed as well because, you know, if like back in the day, saying it that way, is that there wasn't that many services. It wasn't just that we couldn't access them. There wasn't anything because they were hidden children. You know, people didn't take kids with disabilities out. You know, they didn't do anything. They just stayed at home. Most of them didn't even go to school because schools couldn't manage. And a lot of that has changed now, and you know it is more out in the open. People are talking about it more and more. You hear it every single day talked about in the news of some reason or another. So I think it's not just Google, and it is that there is more services out there. So you know we just need to kind of get a little bit more clued up and sort of ask for the right help.
So let's talk about the other side of the spectrum then, the people who don't have a family member who have those additional needs. Take myself as an example. What could I be doing more to be supportive if I was to come across a family or a child, say in an event or anything like that? And there is a reason why I ask, but why don't you tell me what should I be doing a bit more?
Just being more respectful of them, that, you know, if their child is being stubborn and doesn't want to go through a door because they can see lots of people and they're having a bit of a freak out, is that just, you know, be nice, be polite, smile at them, either walk away because you've got nothing else to say to them, or ask if they want some help. You know, and sometimes they won't want that help, but what they don't want is for somebody to look down at them, or kind of roll their eyes as if, oh, well, that's a parent who can't manage their child. Because actually you don't know what's really going on. So it is, and, you know, I did go to an event probably a couple of years ago, and it was a charity event, and I was actually sitting on the door, and we did have a family come in, and this mum had a child who had ASD, autism, and she was really struggling with her because she could see this massive hall of people, lots and lots of noise, and she didn't know how to get her in, and she didn't know what to do, and she was, you know, getting really frustrated and getting in a flap because she could see all these people looking at her. I just took her to the side and I asked her what the issue, you know, what the problem was, and she said she doesn't want to see she's scared of all these people. So I asked her, I said, oh, has she got her ear defenders? So you will see sometimes children walking around with headphones, and they're not necessarily listening to music, they're just blocking out all the noise because they can't cope when they go to weddings and things. So she said, yeah. I said, well, do you want to put them on? And then I took her to another room that still overlooked the hall, but it just gave her a quiet space. And I said, when your daughter's ready and when she feels comfortable, you can bring her down if she wants to. And if she doesn't, then just stay here.
So it's being mindful.
Yeah.
Being mindful. I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'll come on to the story that I want to share. But very quickly, we have 2 questions. The first question is, if a parent is classed as disabled, can they still keep their children? Now, I'm not sure if Sabiha can actually answer this question. No, Are you able to?
I mean, we've had plenty of parents that have got disabilities, whether it's physical, whether it's, you know, mental health-wise. They still have their children, because as long as their children are not neglected, they can care for them, they can love them, then, yeah. They
in a safe
children.
environment.
Yeah, they will have them, and yeah, they can care for them. You know, we have lots and lots of young carers, and that, sorry, I missed that bit out. That's one bit that does come under us as well. So young carers are children who care for their parents. And that could be any way, whether they physically might help their parents get dressed, get breakfast ready, and maybe some of the roles that a parent would do with them, but that doesn't mean that that parent isn't doesn't love their child or isn't able to provide for them. It's just that physically they can't do certain things, so their child helps them. So we provide like a youth club that they can go to and be a child when they need to. So yeah,
it's a family unit. I mean, Islam promotes family values above all else, right? And I remember back when I used to do a different kind of law, there was an instance where I was before an immigration judge, and we were talking about care homes. And not just care homes, we were talking about a young female adult, so at the age of, in her 20s, still living with the parents. Now, the Home Office were in disbelief, completely up in uproar, is how is a young adult dependent on her parents? And it was the judge who spoke. I didn't even have to make any representations. The judge shut down the Home Office immediately and said that in the Asian community, it's the norm that, but it's not just the norm, it's in our religion, it's inherent, that a young Muslim female stays with the parents, is dependent on the parent until she is married.
Yeah.
And that a Home Office had no arguments to put forward there. So it's not a case of where these services will say, oh no, just because that child is an adult, they've got to move out and they can't stay with their parent. They understand that sometimes parents will have their children living with them, and like you said, if the parent is disabled, the child can care for them and they'll be classed as young carers.
Yeah. And I mean, we're talking the youngest carers we've the youth club kind of runs from 11 upwards, but we will have carers that are like 7 and 8 years old.
Yeah, but 7 and 8 year olds can be very mature.
Yeah.
I mean, my boys were very mature at the age of 6, and my Hadia, my daughter, she was, I wouldn't say she was exactly mature at the age of 7. She was a spoiled girl, but my youngest. But I would say she was very clued on from the age of 8 or 9.
And I suppose the thing as well is for the children that are living with parents that have got disabilities, they don't know any different. So for them, that is their normal. There isn't a normal. We think normal should be a certain way, but actually it is that family's normal. And for that child, it is normal for them to have a parent with a disability, and for them that they might be the one that might make dinner when they get home, with mum helping sometimes, and sometimes parents can't help. And that child will do it, and we try to get the care and support in for them to be able to stay as a unit.
I mean, I always say, under whose perspective are we looking at the word normal?
Yeah, absolutely.
Who says so is that word normal? That's what I always say. And you're talking about child caring for a disabled parent, even non-disabled people, non-able-bodied, also have their children helping them. And I used to do all of my events, because I do a lot of volunteering, and I have done for years, and I'm constantly mentoring students and so on, graduates. There were occasions where I was invited to speak at certain events, and they were always in the evening. And there'd always be an occasion where I wouldn't have been able to cook, so I prep everything, and my lads would take over, and they were, 13, 14 years old? I mean, they do home is it home ec or something in school?
Economics.
Yeah, so, they were taught how to cook, but their dad cooks anyway, so they know how to cook. They have to for a young age. So they would take care of my daughter. They'd make sure she's been fed and she's been brought home from mosque and whatever. It's that support level. So under whose norm are we talking?
Yeah, and I think it's that it is still that stigma as well, isn't it? Of, it's a parent's duty to cook, clean, care for the child, and, but actually, we're trying to make our children more resilient and self-sufficient and learn to manage themselves. And, we're living in a world where actually both parents go to work. So even if there wasn't any disabilities, parents go to work, and sometimes they don't get home and be able to cook. And so the child might come home and, like you said, all the prep's done and they just get on with it.
Absolutely.
Especially at the moment in Ramadan, let's be honest, how many people get home before 5 o'clock?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. That actually happened to me last week. It was Mahadia's, my Rosa. I did my best to finish early. I didn't take my mandated hours lunch, work have been flexible in that, where they've said, I can do it however I want. So I took half an hour because I needed that break. I wanted to pray my Zohar at work and so on. And then I went straight, I left the office about 5:05, and it took me an hour, and I rang her and I apologized. I felt guilty. I felt ashamed that as her mother, I was not home on time to prep the food. And she said to me, Mum, you're putting a roof over my head, right? So don't worry about it. I'm prepping everything, okay? So that was quite nice that the child was supportive. Mahadi, my daughter, was very supportive. I have to admit, she's not always like that.
No,
but
Islam,
Ramadan brings out the patience in us, don't
I mean, you're right. And like you, last week I got out of work early. I thought I got home on time. I thought I was doing well. And yet, it was time to break fast and I was still frying. And, I'm literally at the table, then running to the bed, and making food come out as we were, but
and
hey,
it
is what it is.
So we had another question on the screen, which has been taken away. So if they can bring it back, perfect. Jazakillah. So Sofika, assalamu alaikum. Now, she was our guest last week, so it's nice to see that she's tuned in. Great awareness being shared here. Is this information encouraged in nurseries and schools?
Yeah, schools and nurseries are very, very aware of the service. I mean, sometimes, like for us, we find that some of the more rural, more like the village schools, some of them don't know as much, but especially city schools, they definitely know the services that are out there. They know to put a referral in to any of our services. We always say that they don't need to know every single service which is out there. Contact us and we will then find you those services. And, we have a huge bank of information on what is out there. There's things for city and there's certain services for county. And, some of them are shared between the two. So, yeah, it's encouraged.
Okay, so that's good to know. So in essence, in summary, the help is there.
Yeah.
You can reach out and ask for it. Now, I talked about... so we've had another question. So this is a follow-up question. Is this information passed on to the parents?
Yeah, most schools will speak to, if they know that a family is having difficulty, which is why we always say to the parent, if you don't know where to go to school, because they will know everything. The school will actually sit down with that parent and say, look, shall we fill in this form? The only issue here that we do encounter is when as soon as the school says that, the parent panics for a minute and thinks, oh my God, they're going to tell social services, because it is one referral system. But what happens is when it comes into us, it's looked at and they say, right, does it need is it safeguarding? Is this child at a risk? And it isn't. No, then they just send it off and they send it straight to us. And then we look at the bigger picture and see what is going on. So, usually a lot of times parents get scared when schools do say this to them. But schools are very, very wary. They know about our service and they put lots and lots of referrals. I probably would say most of our referrals come from schools.
Let's talk about that word safeguarding. So again, it's similar to the word triage. I know what it is. You know what it is. Let's expand on it just a little bit more for those who are listening. What exactly do you mean when we say, is it safeguarding?
Safeguarding is it's a really difficult one because it can be interpreted in different ways. But the basics of it is if a child is being hurt, whether it's by a parent or somebody in the community, then that would be classed as a safeguarding risk. If a family might be struggling to put food on the table and can't pay the bills and don't have the right things for what a child might need, that might be also classed as a safeguarding concern. The differences between the two is a family where they can't put food on the table and there's a safeguarding concern. That's when a social worker will come in and try and help. They'll say, right, there's these food banks. What do you need? We've got families that are sleeping on mattresses without beds, don't have the right blankets, that kind of thing. They will make sure that is all provided. They will try and find services, charities that can get all of this. That's when the social worker will come in and actually help that family. It's still classed as safeguarding. Then you've got the risk version of safeguarding, where actually a child might have to be put in care because, they are in danger of somebody hurting them.
But that's extreme circumstances.
Completely extreme.
So just because a family needs help doesn't mean automatically that the child's going to be taken away.
And also, I just wanted to kind of explain as well that just because somebody might have a safeguarding concern isn't always negative either. That can also be interpreted in many different ways, and there's different levels of support that goes into even that kind of support. So yeah, it's just
investigations have to take place. That's part and parcel.
Yeah.
You would want an investigation to take place, not just to make sure that the service is carrying out the procedure correctly, but also for you to then be able to evidence that there is no safeguarding concerns here, or whatever concerns are, they can be alleviated. I'm going to jump back to the little story that I wanted to share, because this was for me a real eye-opener. Now, I do have distant people that I know with some disabilities and so on, but my close encounter was last year in a wedding, and I believe I shared this story with you already, Sabu, but for the purposes of our listeners, I was in a wedding. It was, our Asian wedding where we're there a few days early and so on, and there was a family there with their child. I don't know the diagnosis. I can't comment on what it is, but the child was quite of an age, was sitting on the mum's lap, refused to do anything, refused to get off, refused to eat, was screaming at the top of their lungs, and I had a fan in my hand, and the child wanted it, and I gave the fan straight away. It cost me £2-3, manual fan, didn't mean much to me, and I gave it, and the look on the parent's face, I couldn't really tell whether it was relief that I've been accommodating, or whether it was, thank you, my child's now going to be quiet, or did they feel, oh my God, I've just burdened this person. I couldn't really tell, but after a little while, after about half an hour or something, they came and gave me the fan straight back, and I said, well, why did you do that? Just keep it. It's fine. I don't mind. They were like, oh, no. My child will get bored. They've got bored. I've given them something else. I was like, okay. So the next day, I took 2. One for me and for the child, if they wanted it again. I was accommodating. And again, the child did come, took one of them away, and I was fine with it. And again, the parent came and gave it me back, and I was like, it's fine. But you could tell just from that interaction that they've not had positive interactions in the past.
No, and you can see it from that parent's perspective, because they're thinking, if they allow their child to take it off you today, then tomorrow they'll go to somebody else and ask for something, and then because that child doesn't understand that you can't always ask everybody for something.
I never thought of that. So it's managing the child's expectation.
So I understand where but you're right that the bigger chance is actually most of the time a lot of people have either given the child a dirty look, or the family what do you mean I've got can't you control them, that kind of, which is more the one that normally you would hear. And so there's 2 sides to how that parent probably felt, and
but that's not on the parent.
No.
That's on the person making that parent feel
Absolutely,
that way.
yeah.
Okay. So we've had a question. What if it's a single parent who's fully disabled and they cannot drop their children off to school? What kind of help can they get? I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not really sure. With something like that, the likelihood is it could be that social services would get involved, where they probably put a social worker in to sort of see what support is out there and try and find the right help and support. I do have a small story on that one. Was I did have a referral for a young child whose mum was suffering with her own mental health, and she would go into real depressive state. And so some morning she wouldn't be able to wake up and take the child to school. She would put everything out so that the child was able to have its own breakfast and get dressed. The child was only 7 years old. But her biggest issue was she lived too far from the school, so the child couldn't walk to school themselves. And there was nobody walking past that could take their child, like a neighbour and stuff that she knew. After a lot of talking to the school actually used part of the child's pupil premium. And I have to say, this was a real one-off. But they used part of the child's pupil premium and paid a TA who used to pick this child up every day.
and take them home. How long it carried on, I don't know. But, you know, that was something the school were willing to do. And, you know, I take my hat off to them for, you know, we worked around that. So it does happen. It's the same thing. If you don't ask, you don't get. They will try and help in every way possible and try and find a way around it.
So TA meaning teaching assistant.
Teaching assistant, sorry,
right,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, they just needed somebody who had a DBS check. And the mum was obviously wary. She didn't want any Tom, Dick and Harry taking her child. So we thought a teaching assistant from the school who was willing to get paid an hour extra to be able to do that kind of little bit out of her way trip before she came to school to pick this child up.
Well, I actually do know one or two, well, I say one or two things, but I actually know one. I do have a friend who's an Uber driver, and they actually do school pickups and drop-offs. So they have an escort, and they pick up children who themselves are in need. So they've got their additional needs, and they get picked up and dropped off, and they've got a parent who needs that support. So I do know that there are some services out there.
Yeah, so children that have got additional needs, they will do it with them.
Okay, all right. So we are about to wrap up the show. So I want to say Jazakallah so much. Just to quickly summarize, this was in relation to assistance out there for families who require additional needs, whether the parent's disabled or the child's disabled. The help is out there. Sabu, you wanted to share some numbers with us?
Yeah, so the Leicester City Council's number is 0116 454 0001, and the Leicester County Council's number is 0116 305 0005. So you can call in either of those numbers and you will get put through to one of the services who will be able to help and advise you.
Okay. So for Leicester City Council, it's early help. For Leicestershire County Council, it's family help. Is it early help or early years?
Family help.
No, for the Leicester City Council.
Early help. Early years is a whole different thing.
Sorry, early help. Well, Jazakallah so much, Sabu, for coming on Breaking Stereotypes with Zainab Zaeem on Ramadan FM. You heard it here. Jazakallah so much.